When we think about the question of capital punishment, we need to look way back in the book of Genesis to chapter 9. It is just after the flood. Noah and his family are coming out of the ark, and God gives them instructions and says this, "And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man." And then Genesis 9:6, "Whoever sheds the blood of man," that's an Old Testament expression for pouring out someone's blood to the point where the person is killed. "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image." I think God is saying to Noah, to murder another human being is so hateful an act because other human beings are made in my image, God is saying. And so if we're attacking another human being to kill that person, it's as if we're attacking, if we could, God himself, because the human being on earth represents God. And that is so serious that God says, by man, by some appointed, delegated authority, shall this person be put to death. So that, it seems to me, gives a foundation for civil government and civil punishments generally, because if government is allowed to execute capital punishment for the extremely severe crime of murder, then surely government is authorized also to execute or carry out or impose lesser punishments for lesser crimes. And then we go over to the New Testament, and in Romans 13:4, Paul says that the civil authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So Paul says the servant of God, the civil government, doesn't bear the sword in vain. Now the sword was an instrument of putting people to death. And Paul is saying that the civil authority has that power, that responsibility, that authority to bear the sword because he's serving God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. I think that, again, Paul is saying that the civil government has the right, and I think in some cases the responsibility, to carry out capital punishment on a murderer as someone who is delegated by God to carry out God's wrath on those who have committed murder. It's a very sobering question to think about, and it's a weighty question, but I think the Old Testament and the New Testament give clear testimony that capital punishment is something that God authorizes civil governments to carry out.